Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to talk about step 29 of starting your business. So step 29 is about if you plan to lease office space for your business, focus on these key issues. Leasing office space is one of the largest expenses a startup can incur. Negotiating the best lease possible can save your company enough cash to hire a few more employees or launch a new marketing campaign. Keep in mind that your ability to negotiate an office lease is dependent on how much leverage you have. Do your homework. Are other companies vying for the same space? Has the space been vacant for a long time? Factors such as these may mean the difference between you calling the shots or a landlord insisting on onerous terms throughout the lease process. Because no lease is a standard, here are some suggestions to help you become a little more lease savvy and negotiate a favorable office lease for your startup. So consider these points highly important in leasing an office space. Point number 1. Length of lease term. Landlords are typically willing to make concessions for longer term leases. However, your company's needs may change and you could find yourself locked into a lease for an office space that is too small, too big, or with rent that is above market. If demand for space subsequently declines, try to negotiate a shorter term lease with renewal options. A 2-year lease with a 2-year renewal option, or for instance, rather than a 4-year lease. Tenant improvements. Your new space may need some improvements or alterations, a new paint job, new carpeting, a reconfiguration of the space. Which party will pay for these improvements depends on how tight the commercial office space market is in your city. Most form leases stipulate that the tenant can't make any alterations or improvements without the landlord's consent. Ask for a clause that says you can make alteration or improvements with landlord's consent and that the consent won't be unreasonably withheld, delayed, or conditioned. Often, you are able to negotiate a tenant improvement allowance, which is an agreed upon sum of money that the landlord will provide for the improvements and alterations you would like to make. Point number 3, rent and rent escalations. Some landlords will give free rent for the first month or 2 of a lease. Fixed rent over longer term leases is relatively rare. Sometimes landlords insist on annual increases based on the percentage increases in the consumer price index. If your landlord insists on a rent escalations, try to arrange for a CPI rent increase that does not kick in for at least the first 2 years of the term. Then try to get a cap on the amount of each year's increase. If you have to live with a rent escalation clause, try to negotiate a predetermined fixed increase. For example, a rent of $5,000 a month the first year that would only increase to $5,200 a month the second year and $5,400 a month the third year. Point number 4, repairs, improvements, and replacements. Be aware of a clause that says that at the end of the lease you must restore the premises to their original condition. Try to negotiate a clause that states the following: the premises will be returned to the landlord at the end of the tenancy in the same condition as at the beginning of the tenancy, excluding number 1, ordinary wear and tear. 2. Damaged by fire and unavoidable casualty, not the fault of the tenant. And 3. Alterations previously approved by the landlord. Point number 5. Assignment and subletting. Startup companies should negotiate enough flexibility in the assignment and subletting clause to allow for mergers, reorganizations, and share ownership changes. Watch out for a clause that says a change in more than 50% of the company's stock ownership will be deemed an assignment that is prohibited without the landlord's prior approval. As your company grows and new people invest in it, this clause can be inadvertently triggered. Point number 6. Try to avoid one-sided lease provisions. Landlords use form lease agreements that can be very one-sided. Be on the lookout and negotiate on these types of provisions that are heavily landlord favorable. The next point. The landlord is given the right to pass on to the tenant without limit increased operating costs such as property taxes, building repairs, and insurance premiums. The next point. The landlord tries to lease the premises as is or tries to disclaim responsibility for compliance with environmental laws, asbestos issues, or the Americans with Disabilities Act. The next point. The landlord tries to require the tenant pay any tax increases resulting from a sale of the property. This next point. The landlord tries to reserve the right to terminate the lease at the landlord's convenience. The next one. The landlord tries to prohibit the possibility of subletting or assignment. The next point. The landlord insists on personal guarantee of the key shareholders of the company. And the last point, consider using a tenant broker. A good tenant broker can be invaluable and will represent your company's best interests. He or she will educate you on the current market, locate spaces that meet your stated parameters, arrange tours and accompany you to view these available spaces, and then prepare offer letters and negotiate with landlords for all spaces that work best for your company. How to negotiate the best office lease for your startup, you can refer to this site. Thanks for watching this video. Please stay tuned for our next videos.